Because when somebody gets cancer, you're looking for answers.
So imagine a world where we could use artificial intelligence. Let's try and stop it before it even starts. Here's another
That's
one.
the optimistic case for AI.
When the war on cancer got started by Richard Nixon, by the way, Jon Huntsman Sr.
Yes, they did.
was there when that National Cancer Act got signed.
Welcome to the latest episode of Huntsman Knows How. I am thrilled to be joined today by Dr. Mary Beckerle, the CEO of the Huntsman Cancer Institute. Mary joins us to talk about the founding of the Huntsman Cancer Institute, her early work with Jon Huntsman Sr. and his goal to cure cancer, and she gives us a look into the future of AI and cancer research. I hope you enjoy this episode of Huntsman Knows How, and I am going to remind you to like and subscribe to get more content like this. Mary Beckerle, welcome to the Huntsman Knows How podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. Huntsman Board of Directors member, President and CEO of the Huntsman Cancer Institute. There's few people in the world that know as much about Huntsman as you, so we're just thrilled to have you here, thrilled to have you a part of our company, and looking forward to today's conversation.
Me too. Thanks, Kevin.
So I want to start in New Jersey, which I know is where you're from. And I want you to tell me about Mickey Beckerle.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so Mickey Beckerle is my mother. And she was amazing. She died a few years ago at 95, still living in her own house. Independent, very independent. She got up every single morning, even when she was living by herself for the last 10 years. Well, she lived by herself for a long time. But even as she was becoming more feeble, she got up every single morning, had her breakfast, did her exercises, put her makeup on, and as she said, got ready for my public. No one ever came to her house, but she was ready just in case. She was amazing. She was a force, and such an inspiration to me because my father died when I was 12. He had emphysema before they really knew what it was, and they didn't have a treatment for it. And so he passed away when I was 12. I had two sisters younger than me. And my mother had, been a homemaker, but she was also a nurse. And so she went back to work and eventually held down two jobs. First working in the high school as a school nurse. And then she started working nights at a nursing home, so that, she could support her family. And she just didn't want us to have to suffer. And she didn't want to sacrifice the dreams that she and my father had for our family.
Losing your dad at 12, what kind of an impact did that have on you and your family?
It was huge. I mean, I still think I'm unpacking it even now,
Never really get over
You
it.
never really get over it, and you never, maybe you never fully understand it. I mean, I think I was really close to my dad. He was the one who, he was very intuitive. And, he would come home from work and he would, ask me how my day was. And he could tell by the look on my face whether I was just saying everything's fine or whether there was really something going on. And he always knew kind of when to probe. And he always got stuff out of me, like, something was happening at school, something was, whatever it was. He was very intuitive and he was just so supportive. So yeah, I mean, he was amazing.
So you grew up in New Jersey, strong-willed mom, sounds like full of grit, driven, instilled those values in you and your sisters. You went to college in upstate New York?
I did. I went to a small women's college called Wells College in upstate New York. And at the time that I chose to go there, I was really interested in science. And it was a time when there were very, very few women in science. And so I was encouraged to go to a women's college so that I could have kind of full flexibility to explore the disciplines that I really liked. And that was a really good choice.
And by 1986, you have an opportunity to go to Utah.
Yeah.
Now, I was thinking about that, and I'm thinking 1986, everybody wants to move to Utah today. Huge population growth.
Oh, yeah.
New Jersey girl going west in the mid-'80s to Utah. a little out of the norm? I mean, was that kind of a frontier mindset? Well, how did that come about? Luck, opportunity?
Combination.
I mean, New York City's right up the street, and somehow you go to Salt Lake City. How did that happen?
Well, I had the chance to live in the West. I had lived in Dallas, Texas for a year, working as a lab technician, trying to decide whether to go into science or medicine. And then I went to graduate school in Colorado, in Boulder, Colorado. So I kind of fell in love with the West, the kind of spirit. I think there's a frontier spirit.
Oh, for sure.
The geography is so open. Like, it just really spoke to me about potential, and I still feel like that living in Utah. I see this open space, and it just feels like anything's possible in that space. And so I experienced living in the West, but honestly, it was luck. I mean, there's so much luck and fortune, and I mean, I started my postdoc in North Carolina. I had just arrived. I mean, literally just arrived, and I got a message saying, "Hey, there's a position open at the University of Utah. Would you be interested in applying?" I had had a very successful graduate career, published papers in the top journals, Nature, et cetera, and so they had somehow found me. And I was like, no, I'm just starting my postdoc. I don't even know what I'm going to work on in my own lab. But my advisor was like, you should go. You should go out there. You should do the interview. It'll be a good experience. You'll learn something. And hey, you probably won't get the job because you haven't even done your postdoc yet. So you have nothing to lose because, you're not having any expectations. So I was like, okay. So I go out there and, I fall in love with the people. People are so creative, so amazing. I'm like, I could be friends with these people. These people are doing really interesting work. And then they offered me the job, and I was like, oh my gosh, now what? I haven't looked at any jobs. I don't even know what kind of job I want. I haven't done my postdoc. How can I even make this decision? And I just thought, well, okay, I'll see. And I go back for a second visit, and I just trusted my gut. I really, really like the place. I really like the people. It was an opportunity to teach as well as do research, which was the two things that I was really passionate about at the time. And I just said, okay. And then they said, well, listen, we're so excited about having you come. Why don't you finish your whole postdoc and then come in 2 years? And so I had this just fantasy opportunity where I did my postdoc, did my science, built my research program, and I didn't have that kind of overhang of worry, like, what am I going to do? Am I going to get a job? Because I knew I had a job waiting. So it was kind of never happens.
So from my math, it was close to 20 years between the time you arrived in Utah and became the CEO of the Huntsman Cancer Institute. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's probably about right. Yeah.
So obviously a lot happened within that 20 years.
Yeah.
But could you ever have imagined arriving in Utah in the mid-'80s, almost 40 years ago now?
Yeah, yeah.
That you would have become the CEO of this new institute at the time. And as you look back on that, the whole arc today.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
It's unfathomable, really. I mean, it was not, I wasn't intending anything, but I always have been a person who sees things that might be opportunities and kind of,
you could see the forest through the trees.
I'm like, like I said, when I went to Utah, I saw potential, right? And it was nothing I could have ever imagined, but I would say that my experience in Utah was that anytime I got a little bit of a sense of I need more challenge, I need more opportunity, there was always an opportunity for me to do something different, contribute in a new way, serve in a new way. And so it made it possible for me to, kind of reinvent myself, but always have a challenge.
When was the first time you met Jon Huntsman?
I met Jon Huntsman probably in the late 1990s, but I really got to know him when I was becoming the CEO in 2006. I had seen him peripherally, and of course
He was hard to miss back then.
he was hard to miss. He was an inspiration, but boy, he was an inspiration from a distance. And then when you get up close and in person with him, he's really an inspiration, right? I mean, the guy was incredible, right? So, I started talking with him around the time I was considering the CEO position, and just hearing him talk about, standing on that empty hillside and his cancer diagnosis, and deciding that he was determined to make a difference against this disease. He was dedicated, he was bold, he was aspirational, and he was a person who he dreamed so big. He dreamed so big in every different dimension. And then he was like so determined. I mean, it was just an inspiration.
As a researcher and teacher back then, when you have this prominent member of, industrialists saying, I want to cure cancer.
Yeah.
I mean, does somebody like you back then think, that's kind of crazy? I mean, who says things like that? Who tries to do these things? And then who puts, massive commitment behind it?
Yeah.
Of course, financial commitment, but the time and the energy and just his whole being went into this in the last, third of his adult life.
Yeah.
As you look back on that at the time, could you ever envisioned what is happening there today?
He would be so happy to see what's happening today. He would be so happy, because we just never stopped. I mean, what did I think when I talked with him? I just thought, I'm going with him.
Yeah.
He had
that way.
mean, honestly, I'm like, this is a vision. This is an impossible dream, but together you can make impossible things possible. And that's the way he inspired me, and that's the way he inspired so many other people, right?
So it wasn't crazy at the time. It was visionary, and it brought
was
you in.
crazy, but it was also so inspiring. It was you could not go for it, right? I mean, what's the point to work so hard for something that's not big?
He was definitely one of those people like Bezos and Gates. They're visionaries, and everybody else kind of looks and says, "Oh, that's a great idea, but how do we do that?"
Yeah,
they're able to break through that. And
I
find the right people to execute.
Yeah, that, and I think, he was just so inspiring, right? And he also, so he kind of taught the institution, right? Be bold, be willing to do the hard things, be willing to take some risk, because the big things are just not right in front of your face, right? It requires some creativity. It requires doing experiments. It requires taking risk. It requires sacrifice, right? And he was there demonstrating all of that every single day. I mean, he sacrificed. He mortgaged his house. He put his reputation on the line for this dream. And I mean, Huntsman Cancer Institute has had such an impact, and it would not have been there if it was not for him, and now his whole family.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to kind of lives and hope, but first I want to talk about cancer treatment from that time to today, and I ask these questions as a total amateur, right? I don't know anything about cancer research. Obviously, we all know people that have cancer or had cancer. So if you walked into the Huntsman Cancer Institute in 2005 compared to today, and again, we could pick a cancer, but how is it different in terms of the treatment you're going to get, the likelihood that you're going to survive? There were cancers back then that may have been, you have 12 months to live, that now you can live 10 more years.
Yeah.
A lot's happened in 20 years. What's different between then and now?
How much time do you have?
As much as you have.
I mean, it's a completely different world. Let me just say that. It is a completely different world. I mean, I don't know whether the right year is 20 years ago, but I mean, when I first got started, in science and, in cancer research, I mean, cancer was a death sentence. Really, it was a death sentence. And It was a terrifying word. There was some hope on the horizon, but now there's hope that actually has reality attached to it. I mean, it's hope that comes with real potential for healing, whereas before it was hope, hard stop. And, I think, so much progress, right? I mean, 34% reduction in cancer mortality since the war on cancer got started. For pediatric patients, if you got a cancer diagnosis when I started out in this field, 60% of the people died. 60% within 5 years. Now 85% live, right? I mean,
wow.
So cancer care has been transformed, and it has been transformed by science, by discoveries that get made in laboratories, that get translated into the clinic to the patient's bedside. And, cancer care is completely different. I mean, we used to have for a long time surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. I mean, and I say chemotherapy, but what I mean by that is toxic chemotherapy, which we were giving to patients drugs that just killed any cell in their body that was dividing. Okay, so that included their tumor, but it also included their skin.
Things they need.
Everything they need, right?
Yeah.
So it has been transformed now from those three basic tools, augmented by precision medicine, by immunotherapy, by a host of new technologies that can be deployed every day. So it's a completely different situation. And now you can actually speak to a patient and a family member and say, listen, you are in a situation where you have hope, and the hope comes from the science that's been done and our ability to take that science to your bedside and make a difference in your outcomes.
So I have had the privilege of being at the HCI. I've walked through the laboratories, and I have a similar feeling that I have when I walk through the Huntsman R&D Center.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's a feeling of a non-science background and kind of an awe of like, how do you, like in our company, you'll see somebody testing new foams that'll end up in a car.
Yeah.
And for me, I just find that to be a marvel of science.
Yeah.
I've learned a little bit about how that happens at the company, but for the average person listening, how do you go from people in a lab that are testing things to the bedside into helping cure somebody that has breast cancer or any type of cancer? What's the time frame on that? Like, how does that happen? I want to try to make that tangible for people, because to the average person, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
But help me understand that.
Well, there's not just one pathway, but I will say, your comment about the Innovation Center really rings true with me, because, as a board member, when I first joined the board, one of the first things I did when I came to Houston is go to the Innovation Center. Right. And I was like, wow, this
that's
feels
how I feel
to me, but to me, it feels like home, right?
Of course.
Because it's laboratories, it's like
I feel
chemistry.
uncomfortable because everybody's so smart.
But the thing that is so similar, right? I mean, what Huntsman, the corporation, is doing, and what Huntsman Cancer Institute is doing, is we're starting with, a challenge, an unmet need, whether it's lightweighting, or
emissions reduction,
sure, or a health issue. Right, you're starting with that unmet need, and then you're seeing like the pathways that are there aren't fully addressing that need. So it's like, we got to innovate. We've got to do something differently. We've got to see the world in new ways. We've got to take pieces of the puzzle. We've got to find new puzzle pieces. And it's the same process, really, but the innovation is driven by a vision for something that doesn't exist. A cure, a new technology, something that really makes the world a better place, whether it's at Huntsman Corporation or Huntsman Cancer Institute. So in the cancer space, we're all driven by wanting to make a difference in the disease, but we're understanding, like in our labs, starting with the basic mechanisms that cause cancer, and then taking those and unraveling pathways, and then testing, potential intervention based on that science in the laboratory, in animal models, in the test tube. And then there's a whole process of, bringing those innovations to a patient in a safe and reliable way, and testing those innovations in populations through clinical trials, so that once we bring something that's been approved to the clinic, we know it's going to work in all populations, not just in one person.
So in the last decade, I mean, what are the kind of one or two things in the cancer treatment world that have just changed the game? And because again, average person doesn't see this stuff, but they probably benefit when they're visiting their parents in the hospital.
Yeah. Well,
what comes to mind? I know there's probably many, right?
I'll give two examples. One is in what we call the two big new changes in cancer. One is in precision medicine, and one is in immunotherapy, right? So I'll give those two big examples. Precision medicine. When the war on cancer got started by Richard Nixon in 1971, and by the way, Jon Huntsman Sr.
Yes, he did.
Was there when that National Cancer Act got signed. I mean, I think he had a pen from that experience. So it's kind of it all kind of comes around. It's
circle.
Kind of amazing. But when the National Cancer Act and the war on cancer was initiated in 1971, everyone thought cancer was a single disease. We thought it was one disease, and we were really on the hunt for something like a vaccine, something like the polio vaccine that would just, be the magic bullet that would eradicate cancer the same way we had eradicated polio.
So like preemption versus treatment.
Yeah. Preemption, or, if somebody starts coming down with something that looks like polio,
Sure.
Activate the person's, immune response to tackle it. And we went on like that for decades, really, thinking it was a single disease. And it was really work that happened, around the world, but notably really, really critical work at Huntsman Cancer Institute that changed the entire paradigm of how we think about cancer. And that is because we were able to identify through this incredible resource called the Utah Population Database that has family histories linked to clinical records and linked to cancer incidence records. Our scientists were able to find families that had way more than expected breast cancer, way more than expected colorectal cancer, way more than expected melanoma. And they were observing this just at the same time that there was a revolution in molecular biology, and we were starting to appreciate DNA and, how our genes are encoded. And they were able to map in these families the specific genetic change that gave rise to that inherited susceptibility to breast cancer, ovarian cancer, melanoma, colorectal cancer. And in each of those different cancers, it was a different piece of DNA that was responsible. And so what that told us is, cancer is not a single disease anymore. It's actually a collection of diseases. And now we know hundreds of different cancers that have different genetic causation and different sort of molecular fingerprints. So that was like, on the first hand, completely daunting because, we thought we were dealing with one disease, and now we realize we're dealing with literally hundreds of diseases. How do you even begin to tackle that? But at the same time, if you were going down the path thinking it was one disease, you were never going to get there, no matter how hard you rode, right? So this knowledge really is what has enabled this revolution in cancer care that has now led to precision medicine. We call it targeted therapy. Now, if you're a cancer patient, you come into the clinic, we look at your breast cancer, we look at your lung cancer, and we don't just say, you have breast cancer, or you have lung cancer even. We say you have a breast cancer of a specific type. And we have therapies that are targeted to that specific type. So it's like the right treatment, the right drug at the right time for the right patient. Whereas before we were using, a one-size-fits-all approach, or sometimes a collection of approaches that we didn't actually know would work. and we just tried one after another until something helped the patient. Now we can go proactively identify what is the unique fingerprint of that patient's cancer, and we have an arsenal of targeted drugs that we can use now. So that's a transformation. And I will say Huntsman Cancer Institute was a leader in that space. It's probably, of two big areas, one of the two biggest transformational changes in cancer care in my lifetime.
What is it like being a source of hope for people? Because when somebody gets cancer, I can't speak from personal experience, but you're looking for answers.
Yeah.
You're looking for care. You're looking for treatment. And you go to a place like the Huntsman Cancer Institute.
Yeah.
When I was a kid growing up in Boston, it was Dana-Farber.
Yeah.
What is it like leading an organization that is the source of hope? And everything in those four walls is where people go for basically kind of, in their own minds, they're thinking about time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is that like? What is that responsibility like? How do you think about it? Or is it just solve the problem? Don't think about the kind of moral part of it, but we get cancer to cure.
It's heavy, you know? I mean, it is. It is simultaneously such an honor and such a privilege. And at the same time, it is such a responsibility, right? And I think it's weight. And I think that's one of the things that's, really interesting about Huntsman Cancer Institute. So just the way the Institute was established and the way it was built, we have this incredible integration between research and clinical care. I mean, for our patients, when they come into the building, they see scientists around, right? And they see people in their white coats, whether it's in the hallways or in the shared spaces or in the lunchrooms, the restaurants. They see scientists and they know that somebody in one of our labs is working on their cancer and it is seeking new insights that will lead to better treatments and better outcomes. So on the one hand, the patients are inspired. And on the other hand, everyone who works at Huntsman Cancer Institute also sees these patients each and every day. We see their family members. We see them trying to navigate their way to the clinics. We see the fear in their faces. We see what they're dealing with, and it conveys to us, I think, such a sense of responsibility and urgency, right? What we do each and every day matters. And I think for everyone at Huntsman Cancer Institute, whether they're a scientist, whether they're an environmental services person, somebody who's preparing the food, a nurse, a doctor, we are all wrapped in this sense of we are doing this for patients and their families. And we see, no matter what thing we're contributing to Huntsman Cancer Institute's mission, how it affects the patient each and every day, how it affects their family member, how it affects their spirit of feeling at home and safe while they're facing one of the most devastating diagnoses that you can still get. Mm-hmm. As well as we're doing, it's still not a word that people like to hear from their doctor.
Right. This is a very simple question, but I want you to answer it kind of with 40 years of experience in the cancer treatment world. What causes cancer?
Okay.
It's not a trick question. I mean, I know there's a million different answers, but top 3, top 5, like to somebody thinking about how do I take action in my own life? Is it stop eating Doritos and drinking Coca-Cola? Is it put more sunblock on? I know that I'm kind of.
Well, you should definitely put more sunblock on.
Okay. As fair skin, I know that. I need to do it more.
So it's a really great
Behavioral,
question.
genetic.
There's not a simple answer. Okay, there's not a simple answer. However, fundamentally, what causes cancer is a whole collection of things that cause a cell to lose its identity. Okay. So normally if you're a liver cell, you're surrounded by other liver cells and you're getting signals from those other cells and it's telling you, hey, the liver's good. We've got enough cells to do our job. Just stay put and do the job of the liver.
Yep.
At some point in time, something can happen to just one of those millions of cells in your liver that disconnects that cell from the cues in the environment and tells that cell, hey, you need to start dividing. And so it starts growing out of control. Then you have a small local tumor. Then some other set of signals or changes can happen that say, don't stay in the liver. You don't need to stay there.
Wow.
Normally a liver cell is getting a signal to find its neighbors that are liver cells and not to go anywhere. But with cancer, once it starts growing out of control, once a liver cell starts growing out of control, it can start getting a signal to migrate. And that's metastasis. And then, of course, it's very difficult to treat a cancer that is spread to multiple places because you can't do surgery on 20 sites. So that's why early detection is so important. Find that tumor when it is just starting to grow so that you can, surgically remove it, hopefully, and or treat any local, spread.
Yeah. And so for like basic public service announcement, you mentioned early detection, like get an annual physical, those like baseline things that they all tell us to do.
Get a physical,
skin screening,
eat healthy, do skin screening. There are really great guidelines for early detection of colorectal cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, many other types of cancer. Eat well, don't smoke or use tobacco products, don't drink alcohol in excess, don't go out in the sun without sunscreen. Basic things. But the other thing I want to say as part of the public service announcement is no matter what you do as an individual, there's no way you can be totally confident that anything you can do can protect you from getting cancer. Right. And that, I think, is an important part of the PSA because sometimes people feel when they get a cancer diagnosis, what did I do?
Right.
What did I do wrong? What could I have done better or differently? And the vast majority of the time the answer to that question is nothing.
Well, I have to say, the way you described the cell losing its identity,
yeah,
what was kind of maybe it was a dumb question or a simple question, that was very understandable. I mean, at the end of the day, there's only so many things you can do that are probably going to impact a cell losing its identity,
yeah,
metastasizing,
yeah,
kind of going off on its own. So that
think about
that was a great answer.
Think about all the cells.
Because everybody wonders, what can I do to not get cancer?
Well,
sometimes nothing.
And the big thing is, right? I mean, the big thing is your cells are dividing all the time. Your blood cells, your skin cells. We're renewing our tissues, a lot of our tissues, all the time in our body. So the cells, they get sometimes a signal that they should divide, right? Normally, right? But they just don't divide out of control. They just divide once. They don't divide 100 times, right? And I think the key thing is the only really way you can prevent cancer is not age, right? Because cancer is a disease of aging. Just all the cell divisions that happen over time, these mistakes that are made when the cells divide kind of accumulate. And at some point it leads to some cell losing its identity.
Other time.
And it's just about time. So, we're constantly wishing to live longer lives, but just remember, we want to live longer, healthier lives, not just longer lives, because the longer you live, the greater your probability of getting cancer.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about leadership organizations. You obviously have been CEO of Huntsman Cancer Institute. You're the board of Huntsman Corporation.
Yeah.
You're also on the board of Johnson & Johnson, which is a huge global pharmaceutical biotech company. You've described yourself as a conductor of an orchestra, and in your multiple roles, you deal with all sorts of amazing people, whether it's scientists, doctors, donors, patients, government, university administrators. There's no personality you haven't seen. There's no group of board members that you haven't seen. What have you learned about leading, but also participating in large organizations of highly functioning people, all working towards the same goal? But people are hard.
I think that one of the biggest things I've learned is that fundamentally people really want to make a difference. You know, they want what they are doing each and every day to matter. And so as a leader, I feel like the biggest thing that I do is help connect people to the purpose. Right? I mean, so that each and every day when they're arriving with all of their good intentions, they can see how what they do matters and how it's making a difference and how how they're serving a purpose greater than themselves. I think that's number one, connecting to the purpose. I think the other thing is, trust the wisdom of the crowd. I mean, when I was, I think this is something that came a little naturally to me, but it was not natural for leaders at the time that I became a leader, right? It used to be, I think when I first became the leader at HCI, a lot of people were saying to me, well, what's your vision? Tell us what it is. Yeah. Like they were
looking to you.
They were looking to me in a way that kind of suggested that I had all the answers. And like, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking to myself, they have no idea. I don't have all these answers, And I was feeling really...
I love that you admit that, because not everybody has all the answers.
I was feeling really like, wow, I hope they didn't make a big mistake because I don't really have all the answers. But what I did know is that collectively we would have the answers. And a really big thing that, that I had to get people comfortable with is that I was not going to be the kind of CEO that was going to say, here it is, here's the vision and here's the path. And now you go do this and you go do that. It was more...
We're going to be a 4-star general telling people what to do.
I mean, I think the main thing was to bring the community together and collect everybody's best thinking about where we had the opportunity to lead, where we had the opportunity to make the biggest difference, and how could each of us have a part in it. I mean, there's one thing to have a roadmap, and there's another thing to have a roadmap with everybody committed to going down the road with you, and I think that is what has made Huntsman Cancer Institute so amazing from my perspective, is that everybody who's there they can talk about why we're there. I had a job candidate once come for a second interview, and he said, hey, last weekend I was here early and I walked around Huntsman Cancer Institute. I just talked to people. I talked to the people who were sweeping the floors. I talked to the nurses. I talked to anyone I ran into. Yeah. And I said, what are you doing? What are you doing here? And what's going on over there? There was a construction site. He goes, I can't tell you that, how amazed I was. Somebody who was cleaning the floor said, oh, we're working to cure cancer, and over there we're building a new proton therapy unit, and that's going to make a huge difference for people with cancer. So it's like the thing that's special about Huntsman Cancer Institute, and I know that this is something that Jon Sr. and Peter also try and instill at Huntsman Corporation, is we're all in this together. Yeah. We're all working towards shared goals. And everybody's voice, everybody's idea, everybody's innovation, it's the collective that matters. And all those things add up, and those synergies that get created is what makes a big difference.
You've been a part of solving a lot of problems, right? Obviously cancer, but even organizational problems. What are some examples of people that you've seen in your experience dealing with problems and how they do it? I once had a boss who told me, the higher you go in an organization, the faster you have to run into a problem, because your job is to solve the problems. The higher you go and facilitate the solutions. What are the leaders out there that you've worked with, and how do they manage problems?
I think it's interesting that you ask the question that way, because we manage a lot of problems along the way. But honestly, I don't see my job as like managing problems. I see my job much more as imagining, what is the brightest future, imagining where the greatest opportunities are, and figuring out how to capture those and capitalize on them. Now, along the way, you're dealing with all kinds of stuff, and you're dealing with barriers, and you're dealing with challenges. But my framing of how I think about what I do every day is never really around problem solving.
That's great. That's not the answer I expected. Just because I know in the political world, they always just saying that decisions get made by the president because nobody else could make a decision. It's like at some point, somebody else would have made the decision until the final person at the top.
Yeah. I think about it as navigating rather than problem solving.
That's good.
Right?
I like
I mean, it's kind of like, you hit a barrier, and you can react to that barrier, you can respond to that barrier, or you can try and find new ways to navigate.
Yeah.
So I think of it as I'm always looking for new ways to navigate. I'm looking for opportunities. When I hit a barrier, I always say, how is this an opportunity? Right? There's a new way to see something now, because I was going this way.
Yep.
I hit something. There's a new way to see something now. Finding the opportunity. And I think another thing that I think we do really well at Huntsman Cancer Institute that I think about a lot is how we shape the environment. Right? Again, don't be so much in the mode of like just sitting and waiting until something comes at you that you have to react to, like a problem, right? Like keep moving, keep shaping, keep navigating. And, if you do that, the problems will be there and the barriers will be there, but you will have an organization that has the agility and the nimbleness and the kind of guts and drive and creativity to know that you can manage anything, because the vision is so big, the goal is so important. Yeah. You can't take no for an answer. You just have to figure out how to power on through.
How much does, as a leader of an organization, does communication factor into what you do, and how did you mature over time? Because not everybody's a natural communicator. A lot of leaders have to grow into that.
Yeah.
Talk about communication.
You cannot overestimate how important communication is. And I think for me, the biggest thing I had to learn is you just have to be incredibly repetitive to the point.
Drive the message.
To the point where you feel like, if I say this one more time, people will think that I have nothing to say because I'm constantly saying the same thing over and over again.
It's called message discipline.
It's message discipline. Message discipline. But now, I want Huntsman Cancer Institute to be the place that if you ask any of our 4,000 people who are working there now, what is Huntsman Cancer Institute's vision? I want them all to be able to say, we are going to deliver a cancer-free frontier through scientific discovery and human touch. And I think the vast majority can. And if somebody asks, what are the most important things that you do? What are your values at Huntsman Cancer Institute? I want people to say, we have 3 main values: patient and community first, united effort, and excellence in all we do. And that drives how we work, how we make decisions, how we deploy resources each and every day. And that's what makes me excited to come to work here. The communication thing is huge. And I always felt like I always had to have something new to say all the time. And then I realized that the most important thing was to just keep saying stick to the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Stick to the fundamentals, try and find new ways to talk about the fundamentals.
Drive it home.
Drive it home, and don't assume that because you said it, people remembered it.
That's right. Yeah, that's a wonderful answer. It's like every day's a stump speech.
And I think
over and over and over. And
I think a big
thing you penetrate.
Well, and it's also, I think, a biggest shift is, I think for a lot of leaders, and I've fallen into this trap at various times myself, that it's about me, right? That that like I'm giving a talk to HCI, and I want it to be really creative and really, not just reflect well on the organization, but I want it to be something new and something fresh. And I have such a shift. I know it's not about me at all. It's about the vision. It's about the mission, and it's about getting everybody just fully engaged. And it's about telling stories about, like you said, like the impact that we have each and every day for our patients and their family members. I mean, I'm privileged because people call me and they tell me. Right? And it's my job to make sure that everyone in the organization feels that impact and understands that they are making a difference each and every day in the lives of people.
Yeah, well, from walking through there, you can feel it. I mean, it's a culture there.
Yeah.
And that takes time to build. It takes visionary leadership. It takes people that, like I said before, have the message discipline. I hate to use kind of a cliche term, but you got to drive home a message to build a culture. And I look at our company, and I think, we have a 52-year culture, 51-year culture that, I think was certainly seeded and driven by Jon Huntsman, but has been maintained by Peter and the leadership of the company. And that's a real thing. When you walk around the halls here, people feel that. It's something that they care about. If you look at, why people work here, you'll see a common theme of family culture. And people care about each other. I always tell people when I've been here 9 years, actually yesterday, 9-year anniversary.
Congratulations.
I didn't know that till I went to my LinkedIn page today, and it was apparently my work anniversary. But I always say, I've never met a person at this company who was like a jerk. I mean, everybody just treats each other with respect. And that's not true in every organization. And that, I think it's very rare, actually. It's the exception. It's not the norm.
Both of these organizations, people know that they are valued. People know that people care about them as human beings, in addition to the contributions that they're making each and every day at work. Makes such a huge difference. I mean, I used to walk the halls with John Sr., and if I would go from my office to, the restaurant with him, I knew we had to have at least 45 minutes, right? Because he would see each and every person. He had an amazing mind. He remembered their names. He remembered things about their families. And he would go up to them. He'd look them in the eye. He'd squeeze their hand, and they just lit up, right? I mean, the way in which he demonstrated how much he cared about each and every person. And I think that's, it's something in the culture of Huntsman Corporation that I've seen on the board. It's something that, I feel like John sits on my shoulder, and all of us in leadership have embraced that. It's part of our secret sauce.
He was the master of human chemistry.
That's
his term.
That's a great description.
Yes.
It's so true.
He touched people's hearts.
So true.
I want to talk about the future.
Okay.
Everybody's favorite topic, buzzword, the issue du jour in every newspaper, artificial intelligence. What does that mean for cancer treatment, medicine, saving people's lives? Does that excite you? I mean, just go.
Totally excites me. And I got to say, for cancer and for medicine, artificial intelligence and machine learning is way more than a buzzword. It is truly going to be an enabler that is going to transform cancer care. I'm a complete believer in that.
Well, for all the AI skeptics and, there's some people that are kind of techno-negative, you are bringing positive light on the AI conversation.
Well, I mean,
this is about lives.
I mean, for one thing, a lot of people think about AI as something that's like, completely new that we've never had. It's part of a continuum of computational power and analytics that we've been deploying in healthcare and in cancer research for decades.
Yeah, what you talked about, genetics, the database.
Right, exactly.
It's the inputs are data. It's the same thing.
It's exactly the same. The foundational requirements are the same. But now, with this computational power, I mean, I can give you some examples of things that we can see now that we've never been able to see before with all of the incredible intellectual power that we have as scientists and clinicians dedicating our lives to cancer. It's amazing. So, one example would be we have all this data. We have biopsy samples, for example, from men who've had prostate cancer, who've had different kinds of treatments. Now we can actually use image analysis of those biopsy samples, and from that image analysis, just from looking at the picture at the original biopsy, predict what treatment would be best for that particular man. That is
crazy.
Unbelievably crazy. And my colleagues who work in this space are like, Mary, do you know what this means? This means, if you're in Botswana and you have a biopsy, almost everybody can take a biopsy and make a slide on a microscope. Now you just take a picture of that on your iPhone and send it off and get told what treatment is going to be best for you.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
That's going to change humanity. I mean, when you think about what that scenario you just experienced, person in Botswana getting cancer treatment, diagnosis.
Yeah.
Here's the optimistic case for AI.
Here's another one, and this goes back to the kind of history of excellence and contribution at Huntsman Cancer Institute. So, we discovered BRCA1 and BRCA2 at Huntsman Cancer Institute, University of Utah, studying families where women had an elevated risk of getting breast and ovarian cancer. We now, from work of lots of different institutions, we now have targeted treatments for those cancers that are based on our understanding of the disease mechanism, starting from the original genetics. But we also know, like, half the women who have BRCA mutations don't get cancer, maybe 40%, something like that. Really? So it's highly penetrant, which means if you have those mutations, you have a high probability, much more than the average, but not everyone gets it. So imagine a world where we could use artificial intelligence and go back to all the other factors, all the other genetic factors, all the other environmental factors, and figure out what are the protective factors that are keeping those women who never get the cancer from getting it. Let's go there instead of always waiting until, late stage and trying to treat a runaway cancer. Let's try and stop it before it even starts. That's another place where AI is going to be incredibly powerful.
Beyond cancer, and this might be kind of your J&J hat, but in terms of developing new drugs, what impact will AI have on that and new molecules?
Oh, well, it's unbelievable. I mean, J&J, another board I'm on, Exelixis, many large pharmaceutical companies and many academic centers are using AI to develop drugs. I mean, you have a let's just call it a protein that's a target. It has a surface, looks like my hand. You need a drug that fits exactly right in here. You can use AI. You can take every piece of chemistry, every benzene ring, every hydrocarbon, and you can break it down and you can dock it into these sites, and you can actually build something that will do exactly what you want to do. It's you have to test it then, but you can narrow the range of all possible chemical combinations down to the things that will really fit in this particular niche using AI.
My kind of amateur reading of it all and listening to you is that it just seems like it's going to make everything faster. The speed at which you're going to be able to do things, like what you just described with linking molecules, that's going to happen fast.
Yeah. Yep.
And there's going to be adjustments for society on all that, but it does just seem like we're entering a phase that is going to make the internet. Let's just call it the 1990s.
Yeah.
When the internet burst onto the scene. It's going to be fast. It's going to come at us fast.
There's going to be
a ton of upside, positive. The things you're talking about are life and world changing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's incredibly powerful. I think that we need to seize the moment and adopt the opportunities. And there's so many. I mean, the challenge is, what to pick. But to me, we're just at this quite remarkable moment where science, and by science I mean kind of the knowledge and understanding, let's just say in cancer, the knowledge and understanding of what causes the disease and mechanisms of disease and what we know about the biology of the disease, and technology are kind of even. Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes we have situations historically where technology is really advanced, but the biological understanding is weak, and so there's no place for the technology to go and actually grab anything.
Right.
And sometimes we have the scientific knowledge is really great, but we don't have the technology to really get there. Like, we know that there's DNA, but we didn't have the ability to sequence it.
Right. Right.
Now it's just like this.
There's an alignment.
There's an alignment, and these gears are interlocking in a way that is just going to accelerate progress like nothing we've ever seen before.
Okay, so this is, it's always risky to get into the prediction game, but 15 years from now, if you could make a prediction around AI and cancer treatment, that's very tangible to the researcher like me or people listening, what do you think it'll be? And you could be wrong. It's okay. We'll come back in 15 years and.
Well, what I really hope.
Yeah. Hope.
What I really hope is that AI and machine learning will position us to capitalize on all of the data that has been collected in the healthcare space and in the cancer space over the last 20 plus years. I mean, we have electronic health records, we have imaging data, we have outcomes data. In healthcare alone, it's something like hundreds of times more data in just the last couple of years, right? I mean, has been collected. So just imagine that, that curve. I hope that we will look back and say, wow, things that we thought were never possible, like drugging this pathway, or understanding a way to prevent cancer from starting before it ever
can stop it, kill it before it even
begins. That using AI will have helped us to identify those factors which keep us healthier, rather than those factors that help us combat disease once it's already started.
You talked about science, and I'm not at risk of kind of wading into controversial topics. The term science has been politicized in the last, let's just say, 5 years. I think it kind of happened post-COVID, but and of course there's funding conversations going on right now in the government, National Science Foundation. People can debate both sides.
Yeah.
But as somebody that has run a cancer hospital and a research institution for the last 20 years, and is a scientist, what does that all mean? How do you react to that? And how do we, as a society, get back to a place where there's a bigger center around the issue of science?
Yeah.
And maybe I'm overstating it, but, on a personal level, I wonder, all the things you just described and molecules and the stuff that we do at our company, that is science.
Yeah.
And nobody has a monopoly on that. But I know that, people should be concerned when these types of things become political.
Yeah. From, on the one hand, being somewhat heartbroken when I hear people, say negative things about science and scientists, because I know these people.
Right.
These people are sacrificing to make a difference in the world, and to use deepening our knowledge to improve the situation for human health and for humankind. And then I go, wow, how could we possibly be in this situation where, from my lens, I see so many positive things that have come out of science, and for so many people in our global community and our national community,
Sure.
they don't see it. And I think, well, I think scientists have to take some responsibility for somehow not communicating effectively what we are doing each and every day.
You actually went to where I was going to go, which is
Yeah.
communicating
Yeah.
the benefits.
The benefits, and also I think, I think trusting that the American people can understand the real process of science if we actually explain it.
Yep.
Right? I mean, I think we have a lot of stuff that hits the news, this new discovery, that new discovery, this new discovery, that new discovery, and those discoveries are often like the beginning of a 10 or 15-year process to get to a new drug, right? I mean, I can tell you for sure, there was just a report published in JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, about 2023, over 350 new drugs that have been approved by the FDA during this period of time that they analyzed. All but 2 of them, I think, came from, basic scientific research that was funded by the National Institutes of Health. Does the American public really know that?
No,
No, of course not. There's a huge disconnect. It's like they see, because what they're told about is the end result, but we have been maybe less good at describing the process and how long it takes, actually, to get from a discovery that has promise to seeing that promise realized.
Couple rapid fire questions here as we get to the end. As the leader of an organization like HCI, you take in a lot of information. How do you stay informed? And how do you figure out what information matters, especially as we're all just inundated every minute of every day with information? How do you figure out what matters?
Okay, well, I stay informed because I'm like insatiably curious about everything,
Yep.
right? And I've never been somebody who, I'm a cell biologist, but I'm kind of like I'm interested in everything, right? So I'm curious. I talk to people. I mean, as a scientist, I ask questions. I go to scientific meetings. I'm constantly talking to people and listening to people, and I have the privilege of sitting in a lot of amazing boardrooms and hearing a lot of really great people thinking about where the biggest opportunities are, and I try and integrate all of that. And then, honestly, there's something almost about instinct around where the opportunities are.
As you look back on your career, you were in the field of science, which I understand historically, kind of like the chemical industry and a lot of industries, has been a male-dominated world, and you have reached the pinnacle of that world. As you look back on your career, how did you do that? What was that experience like? And to young, women in the lab at HCI or the women in the lab at Huntsman and, mid-level leaders at Huntsman that are building their career, they have 2 or 3 kids, they're trying to balance it all. What's your advice to those young leaders?
Well, I think it's, advice, follow your heart, keep tread on your tires.
Yeah.
I think when I look back at my experience, when I started out, as you mentioned, there were very few women in science in my field. I would get invited to talk at meetings. I would be the only woman speaking, and I remember this one meeting in particular where I was so excited. I was giving a talk about my science, and afterwards at the social event, one of the senior male scientists came up to me and started talking to me, and I thought, he's going to ask me about my science, and I'm going to tell him about my science, and he says to me something like, "It's so great that you were here." And I said, "Thank you." And I'm waiting for him to ask me a question about my science. He goes, "We used to come to these meetings and we would have these, socials, and there was never anyone to dance with. And, it's so great that you're here." And I was like,
Wow.
Whoa.
Times have changed.
But I think it was a big learning moment for me because, I had an instantaneous kind of bimodal reaction. Part of me was just like, really? Like a little angry.
Sure.
And then part of me was like just super curious, right? So I started asking him about this. And and by the end of the conversation, we were talking about his daughters, and he was apologizing to me because he realized that, he had been misguided in his comment. And that was like a huge learning moment for me, that you kind of have to take people and circumstances as they come. And the less you can react to it and be curious and try and shape the dialogue, the more effective, one person at a time kind of thing. So that was an important learning.
And he didn't have malicious intent.
No, I think that's.
If he was apologizing at the end of it.
No, I think that's the thing. I think sometimes, because it's hard to be, a woman in a male-dominated field. I mean, it's not easy. You can be isolated. There's a tendency to kind of have almost a defensive armor. And I think what I learned is that the most effective way to kind of advance change is to try and shed that defensive armor in a certain way and connect with people more from a, humanity perspective. And I've never had that not work, actually.
Okay, here's our last question that I ask every Huntsman leader. So right now, there is a college graduate or a graduate student who is finishing their degree in chemical engineering, chemistry, finance, and they are on LinkedIn looking for a job. And they come across an opportunity at Huntsman Corporation. Why should they come work at Huntsman?
They should come and work at Huntsman Corporation because Huntsman Corporation is changing the world and values its people beyond everything else.
Mary, thank you for joining the Huntsman Knows How podcast. You are an inspiration to me, to Huntsman employees, to everybody at the HCI. And we talked a lot about hope today, but I just want you to know that you give me hope. And I know that everybody listening to this podcast is going to come away with a lot of hope. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.